One. Good evening and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns Hour here on YouTube and Periscope. My name's Tom Luongo. How are you all this evening? It's Friday, August 3rd, 2018. Ton to talk about. Never a boring moment. I was actually looking forward to this evening doing something on, like, changing the pace a little bit and changing up and wanting to talk about some other stuff, some more like general culture stuff. And well, just doesn't seem to work out that way anymore. The politics of the day, the geopolitics, the markets, there were at least 4 or 5 different headlines over the last 24 hours that we just absolutely need to talk about. Good evening, troops. Good evening, User 13. How are you guys? Wait for a couple more people to get into this thing, and then we'll get going. So if you haven't done this before, or you're watching me for the first time, you can follow my work over at goldgoatsandguns.com. You can support my work over at patreon.com/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for the Gold, Goats, and Guns investment newsletter, which comes out on a monthly basis. As a matter of fact, I've just finished the first draft of it, of the next issue, the 12th issue. So this will be the 1-year anniversary issue, and should be going out early next week. All right, let's talk about, God, I don't know where to start. Should I talk about Browder, or should I talk about China? Should I talk about Turkey? Should I talk about Italy, which I didn't even put in the liner notes for this or anything? We've got that going on too. I think we'll have to put Italy on the back burner for the evening. Let's talk about China. Talk about Browder first, but let's talk about China. All right, so if I can stop from getting distracted by the comments as they come through, we can actually get started. All right. Right, on our car show this evening, China. This morning, China hit back at Trump with saying they're going to put $60 billion worth of tariffs on our stuff after Trump went ahead and said, you guys are devaluing your currency, I'm going to raise the tariff from 10% to 25%. And the funny part about this is that none of this ends well. I've been telling you for months that China was going to devalue its currency in response to not only Trump's trade war, that would be part of it, but simply as a matter of course, as things play themselves out, as the dollar strengthens, there's going to be a need for China to have to devalue. They've been setting this up for months. They set it up with the Petro-Yuan contract, which is convertible to gold. And the whole purpose of that contract being convertible to gold and setting up an oil futures contract denominated in yuan was that China understood that Trump was going to 86 the JCPOA. They understood that he was going to go on a trade war. I'm sure that they've talked about this, that he and Xi talked about this in their many meetings over the course of the first 16 months or so of Trump's presidency. So this didn't come as a shock to them. They knew exactly what they needed to be doing. So they've been setting up systems to increase yuan liquidity around the world, so that as dollar liquidity pulls back, and as the U.S. under Trump begins to engage in less imperial activity, that the yuan would be there to pick up the slack. Now, we haven't seen the numbers yet. I watch the Swift RMB tracker every month. I get it sent to my inbox. I look at the numbers as they're coming in, and the numbers on the yuan's global trade settlement percentage of how much of global trade it settles, it's still very low. It's still less than 2%. Doesn't seem to be accelerating. At least it hasn't to this point. With the dollar weak over the past 18 months, that's not really much of a surprise. And China had previous to that been pulling back on yuan liquidity for a variety of reasons while it dealt with various aspects of its shadow banking bubble. So now we have that coming to the fore, right? The stronger dollar is causing internal problems within China. It's causing, and at the same time, the Chinese authorities are actively trying to prick another portion of their shadow banking bubble. You know, hear a lot of talk about how big China's corporate debt pile is relative to its GDP and all of this other stuff, and it's all very important. But at the end of the day, China's ultimately kind of a closed system. And because of that, and because of the way the PBOC operates, the PBOC being the Chinese central bank, the way it operates and the way it's announced it's going to operate, and has operated since around 2012 when the real estate market in China first started to roll over, and they've been in the various stages of dealing with the problem and dealing with various consequences of trying to deal with the problem. So it's like, it's, you know, central bank policy, when you've got a bubble as big as China's in its corporate debt space, it's almost like whack-a-mole, right? So we'll get rid of the structured wealth products that will, well, we're going to try and prick the housing bubble because there's housing prices are too high, real estate prices are too high, and you close off one avenue of shadow banking funding for off book, you know, for loans off the bank's balance sheets. That creates a secondary. That creates the next thing that has to be whacked down, which in the historical sense would be copper-backed commodity debt, corporate debt, right? Where Chinese companies were stockpiling tons and tons of copper to use as collateral to get business development loans and to speculate on the price of copper and then they had to blow that one up 2 years later, and now it's leveraging off the equity market. Right, and that's the latest version, and that's what they're trying to break down. The point being that each time this happens, China keeps doing the same thing that it should be doing, which is ultimately to be bailing out certain corporates and letting other ones go bankrupt, swapping out the toxic corporate paper, and to keep the banking system liquefied, but not necessarily bail out the banks by giving them direct liquidity injections, which is what we did and what the West did in response to Lehman Brothers and all of that. And and that's the complete opposite way of handling the problem. We took the Japan route, bailed out the banks, expanded the balance sheet with a whole bunch of toxic debt, did not actually solve any of the problems. Whereas the Chinese are solving the problems. They're swapping the debt out and dealing with it directly and keeping everything liquefied. They're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And by the way, so is Turkey. Because Turkey at this point has got a currency problem in that the lira is blowing up because the lira is blowing up for a variety of reasons, but not the least of which is that Turkey is dealing with a massive dollar-denominated corporate debt pile. And as the dollar rises, the value of that debt rises, the value of the servicing that debt rises, and the lira has been in free fall for, well over a year and a half now, or 2 years. I remember tracking the Turkish lira back in 2014. It was trading at 1.8. Now it's trading at 5 versus the dollar. So one of the things you have to remember about all of this is that when you're not a core economy, like the United States, or even to a lesser extent, Europe, and now China, when your currency falls, your bonds are going to fall. No one's going to look at you as a safe haven. It's all just going to be capital that flows right out of the country. And that's exactly what's happening in Turkey right now. I happen to think that all of this is being helped along by the United States by not just by threatening sanctions, but also actually actively intervening in the marketplace and in tangible ways. Not just the soft power by Trump talking about putting on sanctions, by the IMF issuing bulletins about Turkey being unstable, by the rating agencies devaluing their debt. That's this kind of thing. That's normal stuff. And then of course all the headline spew, which hits all the forex algorithms, high frequency trading algorithms. So which are keyed off of keywords and all this other rotten nonsense. So when you factor all that in, right? That's what's happening in Turkey, and what Turkey's response has been, in a limited sense, so far, has been to swap out the dollar-denominated debt, redenominate it in lira, and allow important Turkish companies to survive the dollar cash crunch and retire the old debt and deal with it and get rid of it and keep the system from completely imploding. Now, the currency is going to get killed under that circumstance, but that is what it is. There's no way around that. And trying to stop the currency from falling is how the government would actually fall, because then they'd run out of reserves. They'd have to sell their gold reserves to cover all this. It would never work. The market would continue to just pile on and pile on and pile on until there was nothing left. Otherwise, because that's how you become Venezuela. The other template is Russia in 2014. So what China's doing is providing a framework, is providing a new foundation, effectively, a new alternative funding path for these companies, or for these countries that are under pressure now from kind of classic aggressive dollar diplomacy. The petro-yuan contract keeps the oil futures markets liquefied, meaning there's another way for countries and companies to buy and sell oil because they don't have to go through the dollar. If they've been sanctioned, then if they've been sanctioned and not allowed to use the dollar, well, there's now another oil bourse out there. There's now another futures bourse that they can now sell their oil on. They can just denominate it in yuan. I don't have to worry about running afoul of U.S. sanctions because it's not going to go through U.S. banks, and it's not going to go through banks that handle the dollar. Okay, that's one. Okay. A couple months ago, I know I told you guys about this, that the Chinese were mulling over issuing metals futures contracts, not just in gold, but now in all the other strategic metals. And they announced that right after Trump tried to put crippling sanctions on Russia over aluminum by sanctioning Rusal and Oleg Deripaska, the CEO. So all that went on, and China's response to that was to issue the announcement that they would start selling gold futures metals futures contracts through the London Metals Exchange, which they own. Okay, so now that framework is now in place to keep the supply chains of the guts of the world economy flowing, even if dollar liquidity dries up. Even if Trump says, you're not allowed to use the dollar anymore. We're putting huge sanctions on you. And you're like, oh, fuck you, we'll trade in yuan. And guess what? This afternoon, Turkey announced that they're going to be selling what? Yuan-denominated sovereign debt. And so it begins. At the end of the day, you have to remember that when you go nuclear, if you do not kill the target, you will lose. The United States already went nuclear against Iran in the form of sanctions in 2012, and they kicked Iran out of the SWIFT system. Iran survived it. Anything that Trump tries to throw at Iran today will not work, because now Iran has friends that it did not have in 2012. In the same way that right now Turkey has got friends that they didn't have previously. Turkey was just at the BRICS conference saying, hey, we want to join the BRICS. Why? There's a number of reasons why Turkey would want to join the BRICS, but the most important reason, as I talked about in an article last week, is that it gives them access to all the BRICS institutional investment banks, all those investment funds. By being a member of the community, paying in capital, all of a sudden you get all the benefits of being a part of the group. Remember also that Turkey and China opened up bilateral yuan lira swap lines earlier in the year in order to make sure that the whole Turkish economy stays liquefied. Now, guess what? Why is South Africa in the BRICS? Because they were originally. We'll see if they stay in it. It'll be interesting to see what happens. So now, think about all this. Think about this and go back, set the Wayback Machine for 6 to 8 months ago. I'm kind of sorry to stop for a second because I was reading the comments as they went through, some of which are very kind, and I appreciate your comments. Now set the Wayback Machine to 6 to 8 months ago when all these things were announced. Like, maybe you don't think that all this stuff was actually brewing back then and everybody was just getting prepared for it. That Turkey had already gotten off the reservation in February. Why else would you sign a bilateral swap agreement with China if you didn't need the yuan? I mean, they could make the argument, well, China's Turkey's biggest trade partner and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, okay, fine, whatever. They've been able to build that relationship to that point without the need for your lira yuan swap lines. Now they have them. What do you think that means? I don't know. To me, this stuff is like fun. I don't know. To me, it's just all fun. But it's really kind of odd that I think it's fun. And if you ask me, like 20 years ago, would I be sitting here on YouTube discussing yuan lira swap lines with anybody? I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about, Willis? RB Tools asks, prediction time. Will Turkey be a part of NATO in 12 months' time? Yay or nay? 12 months is tight geopolitically. No. Thank you, Will. I appreciate that. Will says my analysis is great. All right. And I say no because I think Trump is absolutely dead serious about trying to cut Iran out of the global economy. And I think that if he does that, it's going to create immense dislocation. And let's transition to the other piece of news that has me not talking about the Amish, honestly. This is what I wanted to talk about tonight originally. I'll save that for next week. News came out yesterday afternoon that John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Bob Menendez, Ben Cardin, and a couple of others have all sponsored this very fucking nasty new sanctions bill that even the U.S. Treasury Department is looking at them going, guys, if you do this, you will crash the world economy. They want to put in the kind of sanctions on Russia that they think will finally let Putin know that he can't interfere with our elections and he can't be the bad guy. He can't be Bill Browder's bitch anymore. I finally got a chance. But what about Stormy Daniels? Wow. All right. I finally sat down after 2 or 3 years. I finally sat down to watch The Forecaster. Which is the documentary about Martin Armstrong. Not seen The Forecaster. Highly recommend you watch it. And the reason I didn't watch it was because I kind of knew most of Martin's story. So I'm like, how much am I going to really learn? I mean, I had downloaded it at one point and it had been sitting on my hard drive for like 18 months. And I went to watch it one night and then it turns out the download was corrupted. I finally downloaded it again the other day. Because Martin's been talking now for the last couple of weeks about how peripherally involved he was with everything that went down in Russia. And now his rejection of their plan to take over Russia and his refusal to become part of the group that was destroying Russia, basically Browder and Edmund Safra and the rest of them, and all of Goldman Sachs and all the Harvard boys. His refusal, because his code, his model was telling him that Russia was going to implode. So he's like, no, I'm not interested in this. Aside from the fact that it's immoral and it's wrong, I'm not interested in this anyway because Russia's going to crash and all y'all are going to lose your money. Which was the implication. So Martin's model both saved his life and ruined it for the next 10 years. So I finally watched that this afternoon. And then I had watched last week the Magnitsky, the film about the Magnitsky file, right? The real story about Sergei Magnitsky, the one by the Russian. I don't remember the guy's name. The one you can get from Torsten Crude. And because Martin Armstrong posted a link to it, so I watched it. And then I found another link to it, and I posted it again. And I think I've sent it out to you guys as well. And that film just touches the surface of the story. So I wrote an article this afternoon about that and the new sanctions bill and how those things all fit together. Because if you think about the last couple of weeks, we had the summit in Helsinki, and then everybody goes nuts. Putin mentions Browder. Browder's immediately on CNBC and Sky News and Bloomberg, literally within the hour, right? Like, I do think the lady doth protest too much, for fuck's sake, right? And then 3 days before, we had Mueller's indictment of 12 Russian intelligence agents that Putin was like, you want to interview them? Fine. You give me Browder, I'll give you my 12 guys. Otherwise, which was all trolling. Everybody was, Putin and Trump were trolling all of these guys, which is why they're all up in arms, which is why there was open insurrection after the Helsinki summit, why all of this is going on. Now, take it one step further. What happens earlier in the week? Facebook comes out and says, hey, we found that those Russian guys that Mueller indicted back in February, IRA and Internet Research Agency, they're still trying to influence the midterm elections but they're spoofing their IPs and they're doing hinky shit, but we found them and they're out there. And they invoked the Atlantic Council, which is the political arm of NATO, to give an imprimatur to this new finding. All of a sudden, this happens. And then 2 days later, Graham Menendez, who should be in prison, by the way, but I guess they needed him for this because he sits on important committees. McCain, who chairs all these committees and should have resigned by now. And Cardin, who's the guy who invited Browder to testify last year to effectively re-up the Magnitsky Act by taking the Magnitsky Act, which was expiring, and writing a new sanctions bill, which was 10 times worse, which is what we have now. Wherein, as Lee pointed out this morning on Fault Lines, Lee Stranahan pointed out this morning on Fault Lines, that Browder perjured himself because he lied. And Cardin knew he lied because Cardin had been in contact. This is what Lee was talking about this morning, that Ken Delanian wrote this article last year, right before the hearing. But he had spoken to Cardin and told him flat out, there's something wrong with Browder's story. And Cardin still brought Browder in to the congressional hearings. So as Lee pointed out this morning, that's the burning perjury. I personally think all these guys should be tried for espionage. When you start factoring in Christopher Steele, the Fusion GPS dossier, the Skripal poisoning, all of this stuff, all of it. They've been conspiring with the British government to take down a sitting president. That's what's out there. And the Ukrainian government. Last I checked, that's espionage. Could easily be treason, too. I'm not a lawyer, obviously, and I'm not a constitutional scholar either. But even I can figure this shit out. And I mean, if I'm wrong about this, please, throw the comments up. Let me know. But start thinking about what this actually is going on. What's going on here is that these guys were involved in a massive operation to take control of the Russia in the late 1990s by entrapping Yeltsin. It's Martin Armstrong. I've got a link in my article this morning. Martin Armstrong lays it out pretty clearly, right? They stole $7 billion worth of IMF money. They stuck it in the Bank of New York and framed Yeltsin for it. And they were going to use that to blackmail Yeltsin to say, you need to appoint Berezovsky as acting PM, who was in their pocket. Yeltsin figured this out right at the last moment, figured out he was set up, appointed Putin as deputy prime minister. Edmund Safar then gets killed dies in a fire. That was Putin putting the kibosh on all of this shit. Browder leaves the frickin' country, scared for his life, most likely. And then, things get hinky from there. Then you got to start reading Lucy Commissar stuff about where all the money went and all this other crap. These guys are all caught. They're all dirty. And I'm sure that there are members of Congress and members of the Senate who were involved as well. I'll bet you dollars to dog shit on it. And then Putin takes over at the beginning on January 1 of 2000 and immediately starts getting control of the country. Nationalizes Yukos, puts Khodorkovsky in jail, the whole 9 yards, everything. And that's why they hate Putin. And Browder, who earned $4.5 billion through Hermitage Capital, through basically raping Russia dry, then has the chutzpah, fucking Jew, has the chutzpah to then try and steal $230 million in taxes on money that he stole in the first place. I mean, it's when you steal $4.5 billion, what's another $230 million? Call it the cut. Jim Sinclair used to say used to always say, look, there's an adage in trading, pigs get slaughtered. On the way down, on the way up, doesn't matter. If you try and time the top or the bottom, pigs get slaughtered. Don't try and time the top. Don't try and time the bottom. Leave 20% on the table for the God of greed. Just take the middle 60% of the trade. They'll still make you a fabulous amount of money. Very good advice. And this fucking asshole isn't content with stealing $4.5 billion. He's got to steal the taxes he made on that money as well. Yes, Suzanne, it absolutely explains the freakout. And so now, Lindsey Graham is out there in this bill. He's also saying that bill has a clause saying that the president would have to get a 2/3 majority from the Senate to pull out of NATO. Why is Lindsey Graham worried about Trump pulling out of NATO? Trump hasn't talked about pulling out of NATO. Or has he? Why did these... Russia was lawless at that point. They were doing stuff. It was the stuff they were doing. They were acting as individuals. They were acting in concert with crooks and criminals in Russia. It was awful. And I've got links to, in the article I wrote this morning, which is, there's a link down below in the description, to Lucy Commissar's work, which starts tracing some of the money and starts tracing all the holes in Browder's story about how his companies were stolen and all this other. It's so freaking murky. My eyes glaze over. I can't keep it all straight. And I can do 4x4 division in my head. Okay? I can't keep it all straight. No, unless some fucking. How are you going to explain any of the Bill Browder gate in the mainstream media? I could be here from today until the end of the month trying to explain all this. So the Atlantic Council is in bed with Facebook to run an op on Russian aggression in order to justify voter fraud. And they're going to challenge every freaking major election, House and Senate election, this fall. You know that wherever it's important to them, they're going to challenge legally all of it. The results are all going to be tainted. There's going to be ballot boxes missing. It's going to be a shit show. It's going to be the biggest shit show we've ever seen in this country's history. It's going to make the Civil War look like an Amish barn raising politically. Okay? Seriously, it's going to be bad. They're going to lose, but it's going to be bad because there's so much money at stake. They are so desperate to not be outed for the fucking crooks that they actually are, that they are willing to start a fucking war with Russia to not be caught. And you wonder why the alt-right guys are as angry as they are. I don't happen to share their opinion. But it's really hard not to just start screaming about all this. You should absolutely be worried about where they're going with election security. It's insane what they've done. Because think about it. Mueller indicts IRA in February. All of a sudden in Facebook, the 2 days before we get more sanctions on Russia, we get a bill that, how much farther does Lindsey Graham think they can take any of this? But he's doing his bidding because, at the end of the day, he's just their mouthpiece. All puns intended. Fucking circus seal. Yeah, you heard me, Lindsay. You guys have seen the meme, right? Stop Putin in 2020. Voter ID laws. Yes, North on 60. The horror of it is that they are willing to start that war, the one that should never happen, over their stolen money. And this is what Trump is fighting. Because at the end of the day, Trump is going to be put in a position where he's going to have to either have to side with the president of Russia or Congress. That's the fork in the road that they're placing in front of him right now. Politically. And they know exactly what they're doing. Like I said, fucking circus seal, that guy. Thank you, Kevin Smith. Yeah, that'll get you angry. That'll get you hot. This one's definitely not safe for work. This one gets labeled NSFW when I post it in the morning. Yeah, WDM. It could eat. Voter fraud is just the beginning of it. You're absolutely right. But that's where we are, guys. And Browder will be protected forever. Want me to do that again? Exactly. Like, surprised look on my face. What you guys don't understand is I'm not acting here. This is the way I am normally. I do this shit when we're on my back porch smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. It's the same freaking shit. So I could use one of those right now, actually. All right, well, whatever. We're not doing that tonight. So this stuff is bad. I mean, it's really bad, and it's not going to get any better until someone winds up in jail. And I don't know when that's going to happen. You know, RB Tools, who says he's not an American, so I can kindly ask you that your internal political squabbles not lead to World War frickin' 3. Yeah, dude, I'm with you. I mean, honestly, it's about that point where we need to, it's about that point where, you should march on Washington and just remove these people from office. It's anarcho-tyranny. There's anarchy at the top and tyranny for the rest of us. And it's vile. But Lindsey Graham's performance over the last month has been nothing short of it's not just embarrassing, it's beyond embarrassing. It's now into treasonous behavior. It's the mask has been ripped off completely. The guy works for other countries. Oh, I can only imagine. No, please. No, Tony. I'm already depressed enough as it is. Tony Sankey pops in. Good evening, Tony. How are you? Imagine if she had won, or one of the other 17 uniparty idiots. Like, dude, I'm already depressed enough as it is. While you're at it, why don't you give me a nice lemon juice? God damn it. Why don't you give me a nice paper cut and pour lemon juice on it? We're closed. Okay. So, yeah. And it's sad because everybody knows it, and yet the guy just refuses to live with it. Like, who cares? I whatever. So what are we going to do about this? Yeah, I mean, and yes, RB Tools, you're from Australia, so, Five Eyes and all that stuff. Yay. I know you're just bringing some perspective, Tony. I get it. I know. Please believe, as much as I may complain about Trump here and there, dude, I kiss the ground every frickin' morning that I can say President Trump and not President Clinton. I mean, no. I mean, yeah, vote. Make it happen. At this point, I got to vote for Skeletor over frickin' Bill Nelson for Senate. I mean, are you kidding me? The only good thing Scott's going to do is he's going to have the state oversee the elections in Broward County. I think he's taking state control over the Broward County Supervisor of Elections for the election. So let's talk about something good. So Matteo Salvini, we'll talk about Italy because I love Italy. Because, there you go. All right. So Matteo Salvini, they're talking budget in Italy. And Salvini's talking tax cuts and pension reform. Yeah, I don't know if you guys heard that about Broward County, but Rick Scott issued a statement the other day saying that he cannot, that there's, because of I think the primary, the Debbie Wasserman Schultz's primary was, they figured it was rigged, that he's just like taking control of it. And I mean, the Broward County supervisor of elections, she's under freaking indictment, and it's insane. So, but Italy, they're starting to talk budget, and the carbicide is worth it there. Hey, traditional Italian food, at least where I'm from, it's all fish. All fish. They grow sheep. All sheep's mozzarella and fish, and it's good stuff. All right. You'll note that I'm not an American. I truly am not an American. That I was raised by Italians. I don't say mozzarella, which makes me angry at the depth of my soul. It's mozzarella. So they're good. It's like the only words I say in Italian properly, because it's what they said them in my household. Everything else is like Madonna mia. That's it. It's all the Italian I know. Mozzarella, rigot, and Madonna mia. That's it. That's all I know. Do love Italy. Because the Italians figured out a long time ago that running the world is a dodge. And they just don't take politics seriously anymore. Yep. Not a lot of carbs in traditional Italian food. American Italian food, yeah. Kind of like American Chinese food. There's not a lot of carbs in Chinese food either. There is when it comes from New York. Yeah, no one from New York says mozzarella. All right. Please learn to say it properly. All right. Someone says Gouda. It's Gouda, right? Okay. There. We do butcher cheddar. Hey, give me some cheddar on that. Yeah, okay, fine. All right, so so Italy's talking budget. Back on track. Let's reel it in. Let's not, All right. So, talking budget in Italy, they're talking tax cuts and pension reform. Now, pension reform is not going to be popular. But if it goes along with a flat tax, it might. Now, the problem now is that he's starting to butt heads with Giovanni Tria, the quote-unquote acceptable finance minister. Oh, Fungul. Yeah, I know, Fungul. Yeah, that is true. I do know. Yeah, Fungul. Yeah. All right. You're right. I do. I should use that more often than what I normally say. I guess low carbs and wine. Okay, you guys are on a fucking roll tonight. This is great. You're killing me. I can't get a sentence out. So what's interesting here is that the big issue with any budget that they put forth is that it's going to run afoul of the EU and their budgetary rules. Because, of course, the budgetary projections will be written in such a way that they will not be favorable to Italy, and therefore the EU will try and come down hard on them. The issue then is that Salvini is going to have to sell to the Italian people. It's always going to come down to this. It's going to come down to the Italian people deciding that they no longer want to be in the euro. They're going to have to make that choice. And if they can't make that choice, then it's going to be lights out for Italy. That Italy will not happen, or Italexit will not happen. And it's going to be the same thing that we saw with Greece. And so this has got to happen over the course of time to get the people to the point where they are so angry with the Germans and they're so angry with the EU. Fungul to the EU. Yes, right. That they're willing to blow the thing up. We'll see. I don't know if I don't know if who's in charge of Italy is radical enough to go that route, and whether or not Salvini will get and the rest of the league will get the support that it needs to do that. Now, speaking of that, someone mentioned earlier that the CDU-CSU alliance in Germany is now under 30%, and that Alternative for Germany is now polling at 17 to 18%. I've seen as high as 18%. That's a good sign, but it's got to move from 18 to 20 within a couple of months, or they really haven't crossed the gap. One more cannibalized Italian girl left in the trash bag should do it. Yay. Maybe. Let's hope let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope that they come to their senses well before there's more violence. Because at the end of the day, but what's interesting, you have that. I don't know if you guys saw the thing from Viktor Orban and his 5 points of Eastern European or Central European sovereignty. You didn't see that, dude. Remember that the Italians also birthed empire. You also note that they weren't all that enamored of fascism for very long. Yeah, I'm also interested in why Will thinks that Spain is going to make a big change quickly. I'm not seeing it at this point. Their push hard left has not left them in a good place. All right, fair enough. I mean, I hope so. I'd love to see Spain, like I'd love to see the sitting Spanish government allow Catalonia to leave, like to have the whole thing start all over again, and then break the country up, break Catalonia off. The Basques would break off. The whole thing would just like explode overnight, and then the European Union the euro would start to just crumble. The whole thing would start to fall apart. Because remember, you've got that going on. Because look, while China is bringing this all the way back around to the beginning, while China is having to devalue the yuan, it's putting massive pressure on world markets. Okay, we're seeing real stressors coming in the gold and the euro and the yen and the Japanese bond markets. If you don't think that the Bank of Japan having to intervene in the 10-year bond market and eventually raise their reference rate for the 10-year bond, if you don't think that that's related to what's going on in China and thereby the US dollar, you're missing the point. It's all connected. And at some point, you're going to wake up one morning and the market's going to be down 20%. Not the stock market, but like a major currency market's going to be down 10, 15%. And you're going to be like, what the hell happened? I'm like, what I've been telling you is going to happen. I don't have the dates. Martin Armstrong most likely has the dates. If he truly does have the dates. I mean, I take Martin's predictions and his forecasts with a grain of salt. I absolutely do. I'd like to believe they're true. I'd like to believe that his model is, that good. I'm not convinced that it is. Because things that predict are ultimately self-fulfilling prophecies. Is cucked Europe struggling to wake up too late? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that the sovereign debt crisis hits at some point regardless. And the question is whether or not certain countries will get out before it happens. And, will the Brits be allowed to leave? Will the Italians leave? Will they get out of the shit show before it all falls apart? Well, that's pretty much my standard operating principle at this point, Cynical Skeptic, which is that I'm pretty much going to support anyone who's fundamentally anti-globalist. The European Union is not salvageable. because the European Union is built on a faulty foundation of a political union without a currency union. And so while you might have a customs union, having a political union and a customs union without a currency, without a stable currency platform, is a recipe for freaking disaster. The United States is going to fall last, but it's going to fall. The other ones are going to fall first because they're more exposed. And because of the inertia of the markets, and because of the way contracts are written, and because of the way banking rules and investment rules are written, and all of these things are in place. Right? Any prophecy with a human, where the human knows that he's being prophesized, is a methodological error. Right. Will, you're absolutely right. The EU was built to fail. I know that the dollar is an enormous Ponzi scheme, but if you think the dollar is an enormous Ponzi scheme, everything else is based on the value of the dollar. So they are Ponzi. They are first and second and third derivatives of the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. And I get news for you. Second and third derivatives are far more freaking volatile than underlying functions. I do know my math. I'm not absolving the dollar of its issues. Name of the thing is gold, goats, and guns, after all. But now, as far as culturally, yes. Now, here's the gig. Culturally, I think, yeah, you have there are still tremendous pockets of culture and tradition within Europe that will survive brilliantly. There's no doubt in my mind. The United States is like 12 different freaking cultures. That's the problem. We have this idea that America is one monolithic culture. It's not. Dude, the Northeast looks nothing like Florida. Hell, where I live in North Florida looks nothing like Miami. Texas doesn't look a goddamn thing like Seattle. South, the Midwest, the Northeast, the left coast, the mountain states. It's, dude, you know, some places are dominated by Scots-Irish, others by Germans, others by Swedes, others by Yankees, you know. And then there's the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans. Dude, it's a huge country, and it's ungovernable under one rubric. User 13, I agree that if we broke up along kind of cultural lines, everything would be fine. Problem is that the power structure centered around New York and Washington doesn't want that to happen. That's the problem. Okay, so, you know, I've been saying for years that the United States would easily break up into 7 or 8 different countries. Hawaii would break off, Alaska would break off into their own separate countries, or Alaska would become part of Canada. Probably Alaska would just be its own country, for Christ's sake. Same thing with Hawaii. South would definitely is its own culture, traditional, but, you know, the Civil War South, all the way out to Texas. I think you could easily make a country from Texas to Florida up to like South Carolina. I'm not sure about North Carolina at this point. The Midwest, the Northeast, the mountain states, the left coast, 5 or 6 different countries. Nevada and I'd even see Nevada and like being its own enclave. Yes, the transnational banker mafia is the root of the evil, and the U.S. military is the muscle that sustains this criminal enterprise. Hard to argue with that. WDM's comment is also important. In America, we were united in the belief of the rule of law and the Constitution and the sovereignty of the individual to get redress of grievance from its government. That's gone. Now it's a shit show and a free-for-all. Some of that is mine. Embellishment. How long can Trumpism support the buck? The buck is going to be supported by international capital flows as the political crisis across the world unfolds. Okay? And just because we're having political crisis here in the United States is not enough to switch the flow of capital at this point. So it's important to understand that when I talk about a strong dollar wave, I'm not talking about the dollar being good. I'm actually talking about that's what's going to happen. And then that's actually what's going to set up the fall of the United States later. Everything happens in cycles. Everything happens in waves. And, these waves are not necessarily in phase with one another. The Euro's wave is not necessarily in phase with the United States' wave. And so as these things play themselves out, the reactions are predictable. And yes, we're not just talking about the US military, it's all of NATO. And that's why they're so scared at this point. That's why they know that if Trump tries to pull us out of NATO, they won't be able to use that to put pressure on Russia, China, Iran, and everybody else. And the truth of the matter is that the world changed on March 1st and these guys just don't want to admit it. What is Lindsey Graham going to do with the Kinzhal missiles that move at Mach 20? Because at this point, if he tries to put those sanctions through, Putin will shoot one up his ass. And he won't like it. Even though he does like getting things rammed up his ass. Sorry, the joke is Putin will shoot one up his ass. One thing that Lindsey doesn't like going up there. We have to, I think it's time to replace the Michelle's penises jokes with Lindsey Graham is gay. I think that's where we got to go. I think it's necessary. I think it'll make this scope that much better. Just, at this point, who cares about this guy? What's he going to do? Put me in jail? This is America. I'll shoot him. That's right. Everybody join in. Pile on. Don't pile on Lindsey, but you know what I mean. All right. Where are we? 58 minutes. Woo. Doggy. This has been a fun one. Anybody else got any questions, any comments, any other things? Comedy's not good, but it's free. Unless you sign up for my Patreon, then it'll cost you $12 a month. Oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. All right. Yeah, I mean, how can we make fun of Michelle Obama's penis anymore? Who cares? Anything? Bueller? Fry? I know. It's like I don't know what world Lindsey's living in that he thinks that we don't know at this point. Like, dude, seriously, come on, it's okay. You like cock? We're good. I mean, seriously, we're good. Whatever, just. Yeah, it was a whirlwind hour, I think, Will. I think I covered enough tonight. Now, the question about Lindsey and John McCain is who's the bitch and who's the butch. That's all that matters. I mean, that's what needs to be on the front cover of BuzzFeed every day. All puns intended, right? WDM, pound on the Browder story. All right, that's enough. All right, that's enough. John spent time in a Vietnamese prison, apparently. Apparently. I'm just recycling Kevin Smith jokes at this point because, well, they're good and they work and they're perfect, right? I mean, that's all I'm doing tonight is like 37 in a row. You know, come on. All right, and hey, just actually, it's really funny if I'm gonna watch Clerks as if Randall and Dante were John McCain and Lindsey Graham. Someone needs to do a Clerks Redux like that, but dressed up as John McCain and Lindsey Graham. No, of course, he's a freaking Tokyo Rose. That guy didn't. That would be good, right? That would be fantastic. Just recast Clerks with like John McCain, Lindsey Graham, and Dianne Feinstein, and the whole thing. Like, just recast the whole movie. Like, oh God, who would play Snowball? I leave that for next week. You guys come back to me with a cast list of our Congress as members of Clerks. Dude, that might actually be a blog post. Marketing email for the week? Possibly. I don't know. We'll see. All right, you guys have a great weekend. I'll be back Monday night at 8 o'clock like I normally am. And we're good. Be good. Keep laughing. And by the way, ignore that New York Times bitch. She was hired in order to make you angry. Because 2 days after the millennial douchebag who now runs the New York Times begged Trump to give him some relief, then he hires that bitch. And you know why he did it. He did it to troll us. It was a shitlord move. Don't fall for it. Laugh at her. We want her to stay in the job. We want her to ruin what's left of the New York Times. Please. Please. I'm shaking my camera. Please. All right, you guys take care. You have a great night. Keep your stick on the ice.